Welcome at the presentation on the application of mantras in yoga and the theory and practice of using the mantras. Let me first introduce myself. My name is Geza Timcák, and I'm practicing yoga since late 1950s. I'm a yoga teacher since mid 1970s. I'm also the president of the Slovak Yoga Association, which was established in 1992 and is the greatest and oldest association of yoga organization in Slovakia. I'm also the chairperson of the Association for the Advancement of Yoga in Košice, in my hometown, where I'm situated and where from I am now delivering this presentation. The Zinner congresses have seen a lot of presentations of Savita Yoga, which is actually very specific a very intensive way how to use mantras and live music, how to make this process more and more intensive. And we had the first presentation in 1995, so it was a very long time ago. I also then, a couple of years later, I was also at the board of the European Union of Yoga. So I hope I could assess properly the needs of those from the European Union of Yoga who are interested in mantras. So to make it up to date, I have to mention that the use of mantras have a new importance nowadays when we are battered with a number of critical situations like the pandemics, which goes hand in hand with the social induced fears, which was a presentation which I had earlier last year for the European Union of Yoga. And so the mantras are really a very efficient tool to develop a positive mood and also a better understanding of our mind. And it also helps us to one of the major aims of yoga, that is called the mukti, which is a sort of liberation. But when we say liberation, it means experientially understand the relationship between our consciousness, the universal consciousness, and everything which we can perceive. Because we cannot perceive the consciousness, we are experiencing only the effect of having consciousness. So with all these crises around us, a lot of uncertainty also appears in the mind of people. And these uncertainties are a core element of anxiety, as was stated by a number of specialists in this area. And anxiety lowers the efficacy of the mental processes and increases the stress level, the distress level. That means a stress which is not really a welcome factor in human life, except for the case that sometimes we are compelled then to go to solve the problem. Now, Dr. Amen is a clinical psychiatrist who was the first one to use what is called the SPECT analysis, which is the scanning photo emission computerized tomography. And what you see now is one of his results of a measurement of a healthy brain. You can see that this morphology is not really, so to say, the material of the brain. It is the level of metabolic activity which is there when the brain functions normally. Now, when he investigated an anxietic and rigid person's brain by the same methods, you could see that there is a number of holes. Now, it is not a physical hole, so it is not a discontinuity of the gray matter of the brain, but these are the areas where the level of metabolism fall beyond a certain level, and it also means that those areas do not communicate with the rest. That means a lot of necessary tools and information which is needed for decision making, for proper assessment of situation, for finding the outcome, how to solve the situation, are blocked. Now, it is fortunately not irreversible, so it can be healed. When I say healed, by proper practicing, for example, meditation, yoga, proper exercise, physical exercise, proper adjustment of diet, and so on. And he has very interesting presentations and also a number of books where he describes how to cope and with this situation and how to improve the way how our brain is functioning. So when we are confronted with the situation that we would, for example, like to meditate, the mind is not really accustomed to be at rest. So it produces a lot of automatic thoughts and automatic negative thoughts. When practicing meditation, then we have to relax from these automatic thoughts and especially the automatic negative thoughts. It is not easy, and once at the workshop, Swami Veda Bharati, who was the pramukh of the Swami Rama Satyagrama in Rishikesh, unfortunately he passed away a couple of years ago, he said to those who were present that, look, try just to follow the sound produced by the incoming and outgoing air during inhalation and exhalation. And just rest your attention on this process and see how many cycles can you stay without getting any automatic thoughts into your mind. And then he said, okay, was it 3 or 6? Oh, 6, it's quite good. So the moment we try to quieten the mind is thinking that we are just inactive and it is providing us with memories, thoughts, plans, whatever. But if we are able to relax from them, and especially the negative thoughts, when we are confronted with a lot of problems, they happen to occur more frequently than it would be really needed. In fact, they are not that much needed. They can be avoided, but it takes a lot of energy from our system and doesn't lead to any positive result. If we have a lot of negative thoughts, it's easy to irritate us. We are not really in a comfort state. Now, one of the ways how to quieten the mind is that we rest our attention, as we have already heard, on the sound of the incoming and outgoing breath which is called ajapa japa. Or we can use mantras which we generate through our vocal system or mentally. Now, if we use the mantras, then slowly we can stabilize our mind by keeping it on the sound. And because there is a vibration pattern which may be pleasant, inspiring, enriching, and so on, we are perhaps more motivated than just when we are just following the incoming and outgoing breath, even though the mentioned ajapa japa means that we assign to these sounds a meaning, soham, and this soham is already a mantra. So, in whichever way we do it, aloud or just mentally, it is having a definitive impact on the state of the mind. Now, the state of the mind is divided in yoga, in the yoga tradition, into 4 basic states. The muda is a sort of lazy, sleepy, pleasant-looking state of the mind. Then Kshipta and Vikshipta are different levels of disturbance or activity of the mind. And Ekagra is the state where the mind is one-pointed. One-pointed means that it rests where we would like it to rest. And then there is a completely different state of the mind, the Niruddha, which means that the mind stops supplying us with information about the outside and inside environment. And that means then we are resting in the state of meditation or dhyana or samadhi, if that is the state of matters. So when we start the meditation practice, usually we start with practicing pratyahara, which means withdrawing our attention from the outer processes, internal processes. And the help in this process is, for example, the use of mantra. The dharana is a state where for a certain period of time, we are able to rest our attention on the process of meditation, for example, on the repetition of the mantra. So, apart from these already mentioned 2 ways, the mantra japa and the ajapa japa, there is a number of other ways how to engage our attention and engage our inner energies on the way towards meditation. Paramahamsa Yogananda is having a Kriya Yoga system. Swami Satyananda defined Kriya processes. That means mental Kriya process, which means that we are allowing the mind to participate on certain processes which result in resupplying with more energy the whole system of body and mind, and also for being able to rest the attention not only during meditation but also during meditation on the subject which we have chosen. And also Swami Gitananda has a very interesting set of mental kriyas which were also published in the 70s. Now, what is actually mantra? Mantra, the translation of, or the, there are various ways how we interpret the word. One is that it is consisting of 2 parts, the man and the tra. The man stands for manas. Now, manas is not exactly what we understand under mind in the Western frame of thinking, but manas is all those, or let's call it a software. It is a software which takes care of presenting to our consciousness with everything which relates to data acquiring, data processing, Now, data assessing and the selection of results, it is not the Manas which does it, but nevertheless, the tra is stands for making it free. So the mantra is a tool for making the mind free of movement, and therefore making us free from all these models, mental models of the processes which happen outside or inside. You know, even the keenest and best functioning senses are not able to present us the reality because the senses only sample within certain areas what we call the outer world, and then the mind in its various centers is completing an image according to a specific model which is governing our mind. And so the image that we get and the processes which we can observe in the outer world and inner world are dependent on the way how our senses sample the processes which are around us and which are inside us, that means in the body, and also in various parts of the mental processes. Now, the mantras, they do not just happen to appear. They are usually conveyed by yogis and munis and rishis. And the classical yoga literature is having a lot of stories relating that how higher beings, what is a higher being, we will see in a moment, what we understand in this context, we will see in a moment, or a yogi whom we can also see has a realization, and he is then willing to share this experience called, say, a mantra with the people if it is beneficial to them. When we say beneficial, it means that helps the person who practices it to arrive at a state which the yoga calls the mukti or jiva mukti. So when we attain or re-attain that internal freedom, because we realize that what is the essence of life and so on and so on, that would be another lecture to deal with this. In the Kashmiri tradition of yoga, we can have a very nice way how to model the birth of mantras. So I'm sure you know that the absolute consciousness has three qualities which are not really a sort of complete definition, but this is how we can approach or try to understand this concept of absolute consciousness, absolute being. And this is that within this absolute being, which is a concept which cannot be said to be here or there, it is the basic of every existential form, but there is no way how to perceive. So if we would be merged in the being, the absolute being, there is no way how we can separate our perception from some different perception and to be aware of that. So we are awareness itself. Now, within this absolute being, sometimes appears what is called a spanda, a sort of creative throb or impulse or pulse. And then it manifests like in a big bang. So from a no time to the time, there is a sort of process which in this model declares that consciousness is appearing. So the consciousness already has in itself the possibility of being conscious. And then comes the ananda, which is very difficult to translate because it is not happiness, it is not ecstasy. It is something which the yogis who lived, say, in the state of ananda, they sometimes the only way how they can convey that for a short moment you are able to experience it for a short moment, because it is not so easy to stay in this to experience it, and the yogi has the possibility to transfer this ananda experience to someone whom he decides to share with this experience. So it is something which is a sort of infinite joint with happiness, but I would not be able to convey it in a way which is better than I did. Now, the moment all the three, so to say, are in inverted evolutes, which appeared also in our perceptible world, time and space are also appearing, and with that, suddenly the Shakti is a concept of energy, but of very specific type of energy, which has a structuring effect on that, what we call creation or whatever. And so suddenly structure appears, vibrations appear, therefore also sounds appear, concepts appear, and then comes the moment when the mantras appear. How? The mantras, this is the next slide, can be either conveyed from what we call higher beings. You see, in the full Gayatri, to which we will arrive, we see that basically there are 7 levels of existence. If we start with this Bhuloka, which means the world in which we are presently staying, and so there are 7 higher, less, so to say, less materially appearing, less binding. It gives more freedom to exist on the higher levels of existence. And again, that would be a separate presentation to deal with this. But on every level of existence, there are beings. You know, nowadays there's so many discussions. What about the UFOs, and what about the extraterrestrials? Do they exist or not? One would think that why shouldn't they not exist? Because nowadays less and less people think that there are no other places in this universe where living creatures can exist. So the higher beings are those who live in a different type of environment than we, and they have a different level of insight into the life processes, the purpose of the life, and so on. And they may be motivated to share with humans through the rishis, mudis, yogis, certain mantras, which are patterns that help providing the mind and the body and the whole system. So with information and energy that helps to get into the state of meditation, and through the state of meditation to realize a wide spectrum of things. Why do we live? Why do we live here? What is the purpose of our life? How to really make the life more fulfilling. When I say more joyful, it doesn't mean that it changes the suffering to joy, even though there are some yogis who said that suffering is something which, when we realize that we suffer, for example, in a way that is constructive, that means, how to say, when we are very sympathetic to some person who has some actual problem, suffers a lot, then we may also experience to a certain degree its suffering. So I had a friend who, when he sat next to a person who happened to have some illness, the moment he felt that he is also experiencing that illness. So after that, he was careful next to whom he should or should not sit. Similarly, but not identically, a yogi can, so to say, take away this suffering. Again, we had an excellent yoga tutor. Unfortunately, she already passed away. But her husband had the ability to what we could say pranic healing. But once I had a tremendous toothache, and so he came and just took away this energy, and so the whole pain was ceased to exist. Of course, I had to visit the dentist next day, but the pain was not there anymore. So he, however, had to deal with that energy. So he also had to neutralize it. By this I mean that every one of us is having a lot of suffering, and if we understand the purpose of our own life, what is actually my place in this life, what should I do or what should I not do? If we are fortunate enough to be able to follow our real path through life and do not want to do something different, then we are helped in having a nice and integral life. And the mantras actually help us in getting to a mindset and state of mind which helps to stay on the well, when I say right course, it is an overstatement, because it is the best approximation of what we are able to live through our life. And these best approximations had to be supported by some process, and so the meditation of whatever kind can help us to uncover those information which help us to stay on course. Now, the culture of mantras is very, 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 very old, and in every culture which has a spiritual dimension, mantras are there. So the Rig Veda, which is perhaps the oldest of the Vedic sources, convey a lot of very interesting mantras used up to now. When a yogi makes to someone available a mantra, then he is giving something which we can call the best of his own or one of his own realizations to that person, to help him to create the inner environment for a successful meditation. So when we come to the point that what is the way how we should use the mantras, there are many ways. If we just simply meditate, that's one use. In India, you can have a Brahmin priest to recite some very specific Vedic mantras for your benefit. But actually, if someone else is doing this service to you, there is an effect, but that effect is short term, because in order to stabilize a state which is better than you are at the beginning, you yourself have to adjust, you yourself have to do certain things which stabilize that inner state of mind. Now, the repetition of mantras, therefore, is something which needs effort. And if we are in an anxietic state, then repetition of the mantras aloud is better, because if we do it silently, especially if we are not that well versed in this, our mind is, the attention goes away very soon. And that means that it is easier to do it aloud. The second thing is that experience has shown that the basic unit of the number of repetitions is 108. So if the mantra, whatever type of mantra it is repeated 108 times, this is the basic amount, which usually the mantras are not that long, even though we will see that the mantras can be very long, but usually they are maximum one sentence long, or shorter, or very short. We will come to that. So now, how should we be sure that the number of repetitions are say 108? Well, you can one can count it mentally, but as we will show it later on, there is something which is called the mala. Mala is it's 108 beads from a mineral, from a wooden. So there is a number of materials, but they are just there to help us in such a way that we know that if we stop tossing the beads from one to another, then our mind again went away from the mantra itself. Now, sometimes there is also a question that can really something which is pronounced, something which can be voiced, can that lead us to say union with this absolute Satchitananda, so absolute being? And in various Indian philosophies, it was stated that the connection, so if we make a conscious connection to the source, so say the mantra which now we would consider is the Gayatri mantra. Gayatri mantra is a mantra which is considered as an optimal tool for attuning our mind to the state where we are able really to reach what is called the mukti, or getting free from all the illusions projected into our life. And so, because it comes from those areas where the actual manifested world has started, and it is a thin thread which comes to us in the form of a word or a syllable, whatever. It means that along this very subtle path we can reach the source. But of course, what more could be said to this? And if we see all these keys, we can see that there is a number of mantras, and the mantra is like a key to a lock. And you know, sometimes it happens that the key doesn't open the lock, or you don't know which one times when during a meditation suddenly the meditation gets completed, that it is really the meditation as it should be. We have to try and try and try, because this is how the mind is getting accustomed to these processes. And mantras can be also considered therefore as a bridge, which gets us to the state which is in this slide also depicted as melting into the non-personalized consciousness. That means well, it doesn't mean our body, but as at the end we will see in a diagram, when the attention rests and the mind doesn't have an influx or a supply of new impulses, if the mind sees that you are not really interested in anything of its project, of its material which it can provide, then there is no other way but we end up in this state which is called sometimes samadhi. Now, here one has to mention that various schools define various samadhis, and whichever way we look at it, I think the definitions are not so important. The important thing is that we get to this experience, and this experience, again, doesn't come easily, but definitely it is achievable. And when someone says that, oh, aloud, if you repeat the mantra aloud, this is not really that effective, Ridvega itself, as you can see on this slide, said that if these mantras of ours remain unspoken, they will bring no joy even on the most distant day. What does it mean? It means that the repeating the mantra aloud resonates with the whole body and the mind. So our whole manifested being is getting engaged. So if you have the possibility to look at this nice book, which is called the Understanding Mantras, various authors are expressing their views, and it gives really not only a nice overview of how our mantras are understood, how to use them, in which way they are beneficial, and so on, but can help one to refine also our way how we look at the mantras. Now, how to choose a proper mantra? Well, mantras themselves are either bija mantras, which are the shortest one. One syllable is like hum or lam. This is a bija mantra, but harim is also a bija mantra. Then we have a mantra forming a sentence. we will have 3 mantra examples where it is actually a sentence. And then we have a lot of long mantras. For example, just to give an example, there is a book where, yes, you can see that the whole page and pages is still one mantra. So the Bhagavad Gita as such, or Sri Lalita Sahasranama Stotra, which are, you know, Bhagavad Gita is a not a short type of literary form. And however, if you hear reciting the Bhagavad Gita, I will just relate an experience sometimes in 1980s, 1990s. We have been in India and not very far from Bangalore. There is a Svyasa, which is an ashram, but also it is a higher education institute. And there, every morning, the students, here the boys, here the girls, sit down and recite the Bhagavad Gita. It is a fantastic experience. Then one sees that the rhythm, the intonation of a text like Bhagavad Gita or Patanjali's Yoga Sutra or Sri Lalita Sahasranama Stotra gives really the whole body and mind a very specific vibration, and so then you feel the whole spine. Sometimes you really have a very, very interesting inner experience just by listening. At another time, in Kolur, there is a temple. We will see one slide also devoted to that, the Mukambika temple. And with Ivo Sedlacek, my good friend, we have been there at an ashram, but suddenly we heard a sort of murmur in the background, and it's so interesting. So we went there, and hundreds of Brahmins were reciting a mantra, the if I remember well, the Mahamrityunjaya mantra, and so it was again that we were drawn to this place and were just listening to it, and it was a very, very special experience, even though we didn't recite the mantra, but after a little while it was all vibrating through us. So even though it may be a text of the Bhagavad Gita, Patanjali Yoga Sutra, or some other literary work of this type, it will give a very deep experience. So the classification of mantras, perhaps the last one, the Saguna Nirguna mantras, means that whether this mantra is repeated with a wish to get something, for example, get health, get enlightenment, get whatever we need, or Nirguna, that means we do the mantra just as a form of meditation. The meditation has also very deep physiological effects. So Dr. Tamto Hirai in the early 70s showed, well, he published in a book, the psychophysiology of Zen, a lot of results, very interesting results, but here I just choose one. So we can see that an experienced Zen monk, Japanese Zen monk, when he actually starts meditation, the tidal volume increases, the respiratory rate per minute decreases, the oxygen consumption decreases. In fact, the metabolic intensity gets lower by as much as 32%, which is a lot. During sleep, it is about 7%. So when we do meditation, whether with mantras or without, but the main thing is that the mind is getting to this meditative state, or getting to the state of ekagra. That means at least for a certain time. That means the state of dharana and then dhyana. So even Ramana Maharishi said in Sri Ramana Gita that success attends the earnest seekers who incessantly with steady mind repeat mantras or pranava itself. By repetition of mantras or pure pranava alone, one's mind is withdrawn from the sense objects and becomes identical with one's own real being. So in fact, here the whole process is in short described. Now, how to do the mantra japa or mantra repetition? There is a number of ways. Sometimes the tampura, which is a very specific instrument, I will try to show it to you. So this is the tampura. The tampura has 4 or 5 strings. This is a original big tampura. There is a small one. There's the male and female small one, and so on. And it is being attuned. So you have to carry on repeating the mantra and generate the sounds. I'm sorry, a little bit it got out of tune because it's next to the source of heat, but it requires quite a lot of experience so that you can chant properly and similarly generate this sound. Now, why is it needed? Well, you may experience it yourself that if you start a certain pitch of the repetition of the mantras, after some time you lower your voice. Now, if you keep the tampura sound as a basic sound for the repetition, then you can realize, I have to lift again my tone with which I chant the mantra. So if we do not have a tampura, there's no problem. There is also electronic versions of tampura which are which can be used but it can be recited also a cappella, so that means that just on its own. The keyboards or harmonium or other, so the keyboards are the modern musical instruments. It's a little bit of inverted comma overkill, so that's too much. If we do not have the tampura, we can do it just a cappella, just reciting. There is also a different approach, which means the singing mantras. That means mantras which are directed towards creating certain mood. They are not identical with the classical mantras, which are not mood oriented, but they direct the mind to a state of ekagra. So this is the tampura which I was playing a moment ago. Now, when we would like to learn the proper way how to recite the mantra, my friend Ivo Sedlacek, who stayed in India for 6 years, he's a professional musician. His original instrument was violin, and he devised a couple of years ago a number of improved versions of various violins with resonance strings and so on, which made his rendering of live music specially designed for yogic processes, then chanting the mantras really to a very high perfection. And he was staying, after graduating from the Academy of Music Arts in Prague, in India for about 6 years. And there he learned Indian music, and also from really best sources. So one of our friends, Maitreyi Ritodgata, made it possible for him to learn from the most competent Brahmins how to do the recitation of the mantras. So we have healing mantras, then there's mantra 1, mantra 2, then Sri Chakra Sadhana with all the necessary mantras, transforming mantras. So it is important, really important, that we learn the mantra in a proper way. I will tell you just one funny example from my own life. When I was rather young, that means 1960s, I learned also Japanese from a book. At that time here, then Czechoslovakia, it was not really easy to get to a Japanese course where I could learn here in Košice the Japanese language. So I had a book. I was trying to learn Japanese, and then I happened to be delegated to a conference which was in Prague, and there I met my first Japanese person. I started my Japanese, and he was very politely listening to me, and he said, excuse me, but what language are you speaking? I said, well, Japanese. Oh, Japanese. And where did you learn Japanese? Well, I learned it from a book. A book? Do you have this book? Yes. I handed it over to him. I was looking at him, reading it, and said, well, unfortunately, I don't understand the Japanese from this book. So I said, okay, so then no wonder that he doesn't understand me. Exactly, nearly exactly the same way, if we learn the recitation of the mantras when I say improper, it just means that the recitation will not have the full desired or expected effect. So we also mentioned that the mala, this collection of 108 beads with one guru, which is the one bead which is at the end, which means that yes, now 100 over 108 and over, I reverse the direction and go back again 108 times. So that's a sort of aid which can help us to have a sort of control over the progress of our repetition of the mantras. Nowadays, as you can see on the slide, there is also a trend to manufacture the malas from various minerals, but this is not the essence of using the malas. Now, important Vedic mantras. In fact, we will concentrate only on three, three which are rather widely known. So we have the Gayatri, already mentioned it, full Gayatri, the 7 levels of existence mentioned there, and it is applied in such a way that it should create in the mind a vibratory information that would make it easier to attain what we call the enlightenment or mukti, or getting free from the usual human way of understanding life. Then the Mahamrityunjaya mantra, which has an extended version which is called the Sanjivani mantra, and they are for averting death, but actually not only death as such, but when someone or we are ill, having some illness, then this is something which is being used. Then the Agnayastra mantra is a mantra for destroying the what we would call enemy, but you know, the biggest enemy of ourselves are ourselves, because we are the ones who do or do not things which are really the best for us. And destroying means that to even out those impulses directly at the source, that is in our mind, or the ahamkara, the cluster of personality cum history bundle. And so this destroy means that we reduce the amount of say negative thoughts or improper impulses which otherwise would come from our mind. Now, when we speak about the full Gayatri, there are two parts added to the standard one, which is the Shiraz and the Vyahrti. Now, there is a number of Gayatris. Gayatris for Brahmins, for Kshatriyas, for Vaishyas, so various social strata. Then we have the Gayatris for Rudra, Ganesha, Vishnu, Shiva, Rama, and so on. And also the Gayatris which address, or so to say, redress tattvas. There are 5 tattvas with which it deals: the earth, water, fire, air, and the akasha. We will come to that. Now the goal is to generate what we could call the spiritual wealth. What the wealth just means that we have sufficient supply of that energy which keeps us away from negativity, links us to creativity, towards the solution, so that we are not the part of the problem, but we are part of the solution, and that we do not get engaged in processes which will deplete us. So this is meant by this wealth, so that we have enough energy to really find the way which is most proper for our life. And we know that everyone is having a different position in life, but there are certain areas. For example, in case of meditation, the aim and the process of meditation, because the design of humans is virtually identical, even though some segments are different in the software which we have. So the recipe, the key towards the solution is also very similar, regardless where we live, who we are, and so on. So the standard, so to say, Gayatri is, and I will try to recite it: Om Bhur Bhuvah Svaha Tat Savitur Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Nah Prachodayat. Now, as you can see in the translation which is below, this Savitur is both a creative source, and it is the, so to say, the sun of consciousness, the universal consciousness, and it is the most virtuous, and it cleanses our imperfections, and links us to what is in the tradition called the devas. That means the shiny ones. So our mind should become shiny, and our intellect should be directed in that way that leads us to perfection. Now, the full Gayatri is, as you can see, enriched by these 7 Bija mantras, accompanied with Om. And then at the end of it, there is also a so to say, sentence, which is a sort of eulogy relating to the Om. That what Om is something which represent an universal aspect of everything. So the various elements, the light, the taste, the immortality, and all the 3 basic levels of existence. So I will again try to recite. Om Buhu, Om Buvaha, Om Svaha, Om Maha, Om Janaha, Om Tapaha, Om Satyam, Om Tat Savitura Varenyam, Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi, Dhiyo Yonah Prachodayat. Om Apo Jyotirasomritam Brahma Bhurbuvarsvar Om. Now, the Gayatri for the Tattvas, why are they of interest? You see, the Tattvas could be understood also in a way that there's archetypal qualities. So, for example, the earth, now to be more exact, sometimes some aspect of the tattvas related, for example, to what I would just in a moment speak about, is called the bhuta. But for the sake of our discussion, we can stay with the tattvas. So the earth quality means that which gives resistance. In us, for example, the bones, the solid parts of every aspect of our, say, physical structure, mentally, memory, for example. Memory is related also to earth because if we put there some information, it holds it. The problem is if it doesn't, but that means that the amount of or the quality, and I will tell in a moment what do I mean by that, is not enough, or the quality is a little bit distorted, let's call it this way. I can't express in a different way. So just imagine that two people getting into a conflict. So two people cannot agree on something. One person is a big, solidly well provided with muscles, bone, and so on, and the other is a small one. Now, because this conflict means that they have to hold their position, now the small one may realize that it doesn't have enough of this earth type of tattva or bhuta in his or herself, and so puts in a watery energy or watery tattva, and it means emotions. So now in the second person, the earth type of bhuta, let's call it now in this way, has an admixture of water qualities. It means that next time when a conflict is happening, automatically, instead of just standing the ground and staying, upkeeping one's position, emotions came in. So in this way, we can, so to say, make this tattva in us enriched by other qualities, and with the recitation of the Gayatri for the Earth tattva, we can, so to say, regain the original quality. There is a practice which is called the Tattva Shuddhi, which is an ancient practice. This is also excellent way how to so to say refurbish or regain the original qualities of our building units, whichever way we call it. So now I will recite the Gayatri for the Earth Tattva. Om Prithvi Devai Vidmahe Sahasramurtyai Dhimahi Tanno Prithvi Prachodayat. Om Prithvi Devai Vidmahe Sahasramurtyai Dhimahi Tanno Prithvi Prachodayat. And similarly, we have for the water, which is Om Jalabimbaya Vidmahe Nila Purushaya Dhimahi Tanno Varuna Prachodayat. Fire. Om Mahajvalaya Vidmahe Agni Devaya Dhimahi Tanno Agni Prachodayat. And the air. Om Anjaneya Vidmahe Vayu Putraya Dhimahi Tanno Hanuman Prachodayat. And Akasha. Om Akshakasha Mavidnahe Shabdadevai Dhimahi Tanno Shabda Prachodayat. Om Akshakasha Mavidmahe Shabdadevai Dhimahi Tanno Shabda Prachodayat. So they're not complicated, and can be easily repeated aloud or mentally. But first, one would suggest that it is better to learn it through recitation aloud. Now, the Mahamrityunjaya mantra is from the Rig Veda, so it is a very old mantra, and it is in fact formulating a wish that when I get ripe and are parting from, every one of us has to part with this life. Sooner or later, we don't know under what circumstances will it happen. So it means that we will separate from all what nourishes us during this life. And so it is a basic wish in the yoga tradition and in the Brahminic tradition that we are not dead after separating, but that we separate into immortality, so that we realize our immortal essence. So, in fact, this, in the Vedanta, there is saying that the only important grant is, or obstacle in life is this life. So, if we get free from all the notions which are usually related to this life on this earth, linked with so many problems, if you just look around at any segment of history on life, you see that really this is not a recreation here on the earth, but excellent ground for wanting to get perfected. So the Mahamrityunjaya mantra has a simple explanation and has a complex explanation. So the simple would be, okay, if I get ripe, do not let me be dead, but grant me immortality. A more complex explanation of the symbolism, because you know the Ritvika is not really a text which you can read and understand just like that. If you don't know the philosophical tradition behind it, you will not be able to discover the real meaning of what is said. So the linguistic translation first published, I think, by Wilson in 1866, is that we worship Triambaka, whose fame is fragrant, the augmenter of increase. May I be liberated from death, and like the Urvaruka, which is a vegetable, from its stalk, but not from immortality. So this is the wish. Now, how does it sound in Sanskrit? Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sugandim Pushtivardhanam Urvarukamiva Bandhanan Mrityor Mukshiyamamrita At. And Swami Veda Bharati had a nice essay on this, that Triambakam, which means three-eyed, which is the Shiva, which is the symbol of consciousness, has three Shaktis. And the three Shaktis is the Jnana, Ichha, and Kriya. And we could enter into a sort of more complicated explanation of it, but it doesn't really relate to the actual repetition of the mantra, because the repetition itself will bring us to understand. So Swami Veda Bharati also didn't have to this explanation by studying various commentaries, but through meditation. And this is the way how we should also arrive at understanding the mantra. And at certain parts of our practice, it may be important that we also understand the spirit of that person who actually defined the Mahamrityunjaya mantra, and where did he get his inspiration. Now the Sanjivani mantra is the Mahamrityunjaya mantra, but plus two parts before and after with bija mantras. And again, it means that it extends the effect of the mantra to the whole spectrum. Wherever we will appear after parting with life, the effects of mantra will go there. And wherever we are, the merit will come back to the present level of existence if we come again and appear on this earth. So the third one, the Agneyastra mantra, is really a mantra which virtually burns out of our internal energy structure that which is the enemy. That means that which makes us liable to taking non-optimal solutions, non-optimal ways how we deal with various life situations, externally or internally. So it is a very, very strong. The effect of this mantra is very, very strong. And if we repeat it, you could see that you get repleted with very nice energy, which helps also in solving the usual everyday life situation. So the recitation. Om Jatave edase sunavamasso mamarati yato nidahati vedaha Sanah parshadati durgani vishvaha nave vasindum duritat yagni. Om Jatavedase Sunavama Soma Marati Ato Nidahati Vedaha Sanah Parshadati Durgani Vishvaha Nave Vasindum Duritat Yagni. Now, in certain cases, we may use alongside with the mantras, but this applies for visual types of people. Well, statistically, more than 60% of the population worldwide is visual. But those who are auditive or kinesthetic or olfactory, they will not really know what to do with the visualization, because the mind is not their mind is not really best fit for this. So we can visualize a process. So, for example, if we read the translation, from that we understand to a certain degree, okay, what this long mantra is about. In case of short mantra, like the Bija mantras, there's not much to visualize, but even there we can find some color or principle on which we can rest our visual attention. Now, if we focus on both sound and visual part, then the probability of our attention going away is assumed to be less than if we use just the auditive part of it. But as I say, it may or may not work well with us. So one of the way would be the yantra. So, for example, in case of Sri Chakra, Sri is again Shakti, that means this universal energy which has it needs more study, and in order to understand the principle behind the Sri Chakra, we would need to study the Mahavidyas, the 10 Mahavidya principles. One of them is related to the Sri Chakra. So this Sri Chakra, as you see, this square, as if a sort of fortification with four entrances, and then the lotus flowers with the 16 and 8 leaves, and then the triangles very specifically arranged. They represent 9 levels, so a sort of a 9-level model of the energy and consciousness which forms what we know as the created universe, or the apparent or the perceptible universe. But as it becomes more and more subtle, less and less we can actually perceive from the point of view where we are. Now, the Sri Chakra can have also 3 dimensions. So next to it, you can see, I already mentioned this Mukambika temple in Kollur, and this is Mukambika, this is one of the Shakti principle, and under the seat of it is a 3-dimensional Sri Chakra. But Sri Chakra temple is also, for example, in Sri Amanashram in Tiruvannamalai. So the Sri Chakra again relates to what is called the Sri Vidya, and we can say that this again relates to the ways how things appear, disappear. You know, like you have a hydrogen or oxygen atom. We know how many, well, more or less know, because the knowledge of the subatomic structure is always expanding. But we know that how much of the electrons does this or that atom has. So similarly, the energy structure, if we look at it from this, let's say, yogic point of view, we have a sort of understanding that what type of energies are needed to have this or that type of material. So as we look at this, say, material analysis into a material, analyze it, what is its composition, how was it done, and so on. From yogic point of view, we look what type of energies and what type of let's say, structuring elements, which is like mantras, are needed for creating this or that type of perception, or actually also physical existence. So the other yantras are, for example, the yantras of the various chakras, as I'm sure you know very well, that there are 7 basic chakras, and they again represent centers where different types of bhutas or tattvas are channeled into our system. And during the next Zinal Congress in August this year, there will be probably, because we don't know whether the organizing committee will choose this this program or not, but there is a possibility to attend also as a sort of program which relates how to work with this principle of bhuta, related to the chakras, related to the pranayama, related to the asanas. Anyway, here this yantra encodes the properties related to this root chakra. Mula means root, so Muladhara is that here is the root. Its bija mantra is Lam. And why it is interesting for us? Well, this is a black and white variety, but it is a golden square. The gold, even in yogic tradition, the goldic quality of the gold relates to the earth, and in fact it represents the quality of the earth, which means radiant, clean, and very valuable. Yes, gold is one of the most valuable elements or metals which we have on earth traditionally. And then you have various syllables. You have patrons, the child Brahma with 4 faces, the Dakini, Da again, is also a syllable which can be used as a mantra. In the center, there is this down pointing triangle with the column, which is called the lingam, which is again a symbol of Shiva, and so it is full of graphic elements which we need to understand in order to see and understand what this Muladhara chakra actually can give me. Well, it is on an energetic principle is functioning. It's what I meant by giving to me is what type of understanding is needed so that it functions optimally, and the same with the rest of the 7 chakras. So whichever is our mental construction, let's call it this way, in yoga and also in practicing mantras, we have a tremendously wide variety of possibilities. Bija mantras, well, Hum, Dum, Krim, Shrim, Aim, and the Tattva mantras, which is Lam, Vam, Ram, Yam, Ham, so, and Om. So in Sri Chakra Sadhana, we have very powerful mantras. So. This is the first level where this square was. And again, should we have again some Savita Yoga workshop in Europe, I think springtime there will be one in Prague, we tend to use the Sri Chakra sadhanas as a part of the weekend program, and so then it is far more efficient to master all this application of these mantras than just if I would recite them one by one. Chakras can have extended mantras, Om, Shrim, Hrim, Ram, Namaha. Then there are special mantras for purifying the Muladhara, Svadhisthana, Manipura, Anahata. So here is an interesting point that it assumes, yes, that the person who practices, for example, this, let's call it a little bit more advanced ways of applying mantras, has a personal guide, which is called the guru. And his mother's name is important, and then the name of your teacher is important, and then, so to say, when I say you are qualified, it means just that there is a teacher who is sort of monitoring what's happening with you, because you know, I remember that when in the 60s, concretely in 1968, it was the first time that in Czechoslovakia a book on Hatha Yoga appeared. And the people who bought it, and then later on when we had courses, came to our courses, they always like to start with the most difficult position. Oh, that's fantastic. Oh, I've tried, but I couldn't really do it. But that's not a good approach, because first one has to have some preparatory practices, then could come to the asanas and the easy variety, and then the more difficult variety, which looks logical, but in case of mantras, it is the same. First of all, it's good to learn it somewhere from someone who knows how to use it. Second, one has to start with a simple sadhana, that means a simple set of practices, and then come to more intensive, which have very intensive results. So I have to build up the capacity of my system to sustain strong energies. I learned yoga from Selvara Jayasudyan's book on yoga, which was published because he, before the war, Second World War, was learning at the medical faculty of the university in Budapest because he wanted to become a physician. And so my grandmother bought to my mother when she was pregnant with me this yoga book, so my mother practiced it. And this was the only book which was available for a long time, the 40s, the 50s, up to the early 60s, because as I said, in 1968, the first printed yoga book appeared in our area. And Selvara Jayasudyan says that you have to make your system able to withstand stronger energy flow. Otherwise, instead of helping you, it may not help you, and this may dissuade you from practicing yoga. So this is why I mentioned it here, that these mantras for purification, which were given here in this previous slides and this slide itself, already need some practice, which perhaps naturally you may have already, but some who look at this video may not have it. Mantras can be used also through special types of relaxation. For example, Swami Rama is presenting a type of yoga nidra in his book Exercises Without Movement. And there you can see the numerals, and you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. And one way how to do it is that at every point you recite also a proper mantra, either the same or a different mantra, depending on what is the aim of your practice. And mantras, interestingly enough, can be used also in this way, like you see the image of Hanuman, one of the protagonists of Ramayana. A number of mantras are written on his body because it was believed that it has a protective answer. This is Shiva who's bringing down the Ganga back to the earth, and this is the last slide which I wanted to share with you, and this is the recipe how one transits the way how the mind works from the usual to the yogic one. So we have the attention. So one attention is which. So I'm interested in something, so I look there. So my attention is directed outside. But even if nothing special connects to my attention, but I still perceive the sounds, perceive the smells, perceive the visual environment. So this is the attention which brings us the things from outside in, whether we especially focus on it or not. So the manas and buddhi, we already spoke of manas. Buddhi is something which helps to decide, okay, from the given possibilities, which one to choose. And then ahamkara is a unit which we can call as a personality. We can call it ego, but ego is, again, you know this dictum that cogito ergo sum. So it means that if I think I am, which is not really what the Indian thought is proposing. And so aham means I am. So this is the individual perception of my being. And it has a lot of, so to say, databases attached to it. So my history, what did I do, what did I not do, how, which way did I relate to this, that, and so on. So these databases are co-creating anyone's personality. Now, the basic element is that all these properties, features, I relate to myself. I said this, I didn't say that, I ate that, I didn't eat that, I saw that, I didn't see that, and so on and so on. I would do this, I would not do that. So always there is this I. Now, this I is personalized. So even though a psychiatrist called Newberg, in his research in one of his papers, said that at the back of the head there are two centers which either are active or inactive. And in one functional modus, we feel that we are we. I'm this creature who is standing here. In the other position, other functional modus, suddenly I feel that, oh, yes, we are all having the same perception of being. So we, even hardware-wise, we are having this possibility of having this realization that this individualized consciousness is one aspect of a consciousness which can be also such that it includes everyone else. Then there is another point that the attention which is needed for every one of the processes which what was mentioned up to now, that the attention is inactive, and then this individualized perception of being subsides to a non-individual being, which is not bound to any concrete creature, whether it is a human being or other being or whatever. So this is something which is a mystery from the point of view that unless we, I could say experience, but basically it cannot be experienced, because if one would be melted into, so to say, melted into this non-individual being, there is no one to experience it. But of course, again, some people say, oh yes, but do I die? No, death is a different process. It relates to the body, but not to the consciousness in this model. So after this way of being, as we see in yogis, the various levels of the inverted commas usual way of perception of myself and the outer world comes back, but with one difference, and this is that on the lower scheme you see that there is an unimpeded flow of information, of what's called the will of the absolute, which directs my deeds. So that means I do not have any longer always concentrate that, is it proper, is it improper, should I do it this way, or that way, but there is a flow of information which, so to say, paves the way to a life which is the most valuable life which humans, according to the yogic model, can live. So in fact, we have to come out from the present way of perceiving the life into a way, into a perception which may seem to be new, but only after we come there, because then we realize that, yes, it's nothing new, but we were not really aware. So the last sentence which I would like to tell is that mantras are not amulets, even though sometimes you see amulets with Om, and sometimes the three chakras worked into amulet, but mantras have to be practiced. And if you have the proper choice of the mantra, that means a mantra which is really resonating well with you, then I'm sure that you will find that the mantra japa or repetition mantra, whether aloud or silently, is something which helps your meditation practice, and a good meditation practice helps a good or better than before management of our life on whatever level. So with this, I thank you very much for your attention and hope that you gain some usable information for this presentation. Thank you again.